Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Angela, and I just did my week ahead spread. And this video has been waiting on my mind the last few days, so I decided to go ahead and do it while I got everything out. It's another dream. It's one I had many years ago, and I forgot all about it. And if you've watched any previous dream videos, you would know that my the dreams I put on here are stuff that came to fruition. There were more dreams that were, what's the word I'm looking for? Dreams that came true. I forget the word. It's early, still cloudy, but it's beautiful. It's already like 60 something degrees, like 65 degrees almost, and I just had to be outside because last few weeks it's been really cold, like in the 20s in the morning, and we even had snow on a day already. And then last week it's been like in the 90s, and I'm soaking up every bit of warmth I can while I can because winter is on its way. So this dream happened, I would say my oldest son, I think, was 3 or 4 when I had this dream. So, and he's almost 22. So it's been a long time. But I had this dream that, uh, in all my like premonitic dreams, that's the word I was looking for. All my like premonitic dreams or dreams that have meaning to them, um, I always come into the dream like I'm already in the middle of the story. Like the first 5 minutes of the dream have already taken place, and I'm stepping into it after the fact. Like I'm already ensconced in whatever's happening. And so I dreamed that I was moving into this house, big, and I've had a lot of dreams of houses, different houses. They look different, but to me, they all feel like the same house, even though their structure's different. The insides may have different rooms in different places, more rooms, stairs. But this dream was all one floor. It was a big, beautiful, like yellow farmhouse, and it had a wraparound porch. Um, it was a huge house, and it had like brand new hardwood floors. And I walk into the house, and my mother, who I don't speak to, we haven't ever really had a relationship. And as an adult, I feel like for my own sanity, we can't have a relationship. She has never tried, and I gave up trying because it was never going to work. So for my own sanity and health, mental health, I had to break ties with her and basically cut her off. So I found it odd right off the bat that I'm dreaming of my mother in this dream, and she's got huge boxes, and they're filled with family photos, and she's putting them all on the walls. And I'm like, why? First of all, we don't have that many family photos. Second of all, why is she here? Like, I couldn't explain it. But I'm asking myself these questions in the dream. And I look down the hallway, and like I walk in, and there's like this like entrance way that goes this way, and then the living room goes that way out. And it's brand new hardwood floors, a big square room, and she's putting pictures up. But I walk into the living room, and then immediately to the left, there's a long hallway with like bedrooms, and at the very end was this weird, creepy looking locked door. And it was almost like like you see in the movie where it narrows in, and it seems like you're like right at the door, even though you're not. That's what happened in the dream. And I'm like, and I just kind of tilt my head, and I'm like, what about that room? Have you been in there? And she's like, no, it's locked from the outside. There's no way to get in, and we don't have a key for it. And I'm like, nah, I don't believe that. So I go to the door, Try to open the door. It's locked. Can't get in. And this is where the dream ends the first time I dreamed it. And for the next 6 months, every single night, I dreamed this dream. Um, as the months progressed, the dream progressed where um, I was like, oh, well, there would be like, uh, I think the first time it changed after me trying to open it initially, I would try to get to the door and there would be like a gale force wind that came through, and there's no windows through there at all. So there'd be like this huge hurricane type wind that would blow me back and keep me from the door. And I was like, why? What's in this room? And it got so bad that I was obsessed, even in my waking hours, obsessed with what is in this room because I couldn't get in there. Um, and it changed again to where I finally was able to pass the wind, and I got to the door, and I had a crowbar, and I was trying to pry the like frame and the area off where the where it was locked, so I could just pop it off and pull it, open the door, and the toolbar, the crowbar would break, and I'm like, even in the dream, I'm like, how is it possible that this is breaking? That it's a wooden door, like crazy. But um, I literally dreamed this for 6 months, and 6 months every single night for 6 months. It got to the point where I stopped sleeping because I was too terrified to dream this dream, because I knew as soon as I went to sleep, I would dream this dream, and I didn't understand why I couldn't get into this room. And it was just a simple dream, but at the same time, um, I became obsessed with what is in this room. Why can't I get to this room? Why can't I get in there to find out what's in there? And even in my waking hours, I was thinking of, is there a dead body in there? Is there something horribly secrets in there? What is happening? So the last couple weeks I dreamed this dream. It changed again. That part of it, just that part of it changed to where I was finally able to get into the room, and it didn't have a light switch in there, but it had a light hanging from a string, and I went to pull the string, and the light didn't work. So I was in the room, but it was still so pitch dark you couldn't tell what was in there. So this was like 6 months of dreaming this, and I at this point had black circles under my eyes because I wasn't sleeping at all. I was so afraid to dream this dream again. And we went to Thanksgiving dinner at my mother-in-law's. My two sister-in-laws were there. My brother-in-law was there. Their families and stuff. And I'm sitting there eating, and I'm just like trying not to fall asleep in my food because I was that tired from not sleeping, being too terrified to dream this dream again. And my sister-in-law, the oldest in my husband's family, was like, what's going on with you? You got dark circles under your eyes. And I hadn't told anybody at all this dream at all. And I finally just kind of cracked, and I was like, I broke down a little, and I almost started crying, and I had like tears in my eyes. I was choked up, and I'm like, I've been having this crazy dream. It's been every night for like 6 months. I can't sleep because I'm too afraid to sleep because I'm gonna dream this dream every night. And so I relayed to her what the dream is, what I just told you. And she's like, well, I took a psychology course in college, and turns out she was only in college for like 6 months. But she's like, we covered dreams, and she said what I found was that room represents something your mind is trying to work through from a past trauma or something like that, and it's protecting you from finding out what is in the room. The room is representing this past trauma. And I'm like, that totally makes sense. And I actually never had the dream again after that. However, 3 months later, I don't even think it was 3 months later, maybe 2 months later, I had an incident where it was a medical issue. Um, I'll just tell you guys. So I went to the grocery store. It was like 10:30 at night, and I came out and I passed out. I came to, and my groceries were all over the ground. People were walking past me. It was raining, and I was sprawled out on the pavement. And I was like freaked out. Um, so I ran home crying and told my husband, I'm like, I have to go to the hospital. That's not normal. So I went to the hospital, and uh, before I finished that, when I was 12 and 13, I was diagnosed with a seizure disorder. It was deemed hereditary because my mother told the doctor that I had a half uncle that had epilepsy, and so that's what they chalked it up to. I wound up taking medication for it that to me cured me, got rid of it. I didn't have a seizure again after those 2 years. And so back to um, me sprawled out in the parking lot. I passed out. I freaked out. I went to the hospital, checked myself in, and I'm like, hey, I just passed out in the parking lot. I need tests done. And they did all kinds of tests. And I will never forget this moment. It was like it's emblazoned in my mind because I hadn't really told anybody about the abuse from my mother. Very few people knew, to the extent of the abuse I had as a kid, growing up. And so I kept it all bottled in and just close to the vest because I knew if I ever let those emotions out, I would just crumble. And so I'm sitting there at the doctor's office or at the hospital, and the doctor walks in, and the moment he walked in, I'm like, he knows. Um, he had this really pissed off look on his face, and he said, and the first thing that he said was, who beat you? And I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, don't play with me. He said, I did test on your, we did test. I did an MRI scan, everything. He found permanent bruisings on my brain, which was causing a seizure, which is what I had had. And the second he said this, it was like I could actually see in my mind's eye, which I now know is like a psychic thing, because back then I wasn't even close to being opening my gifts up or anything, but I could visually see in my mind's eye this like dungeon door around my heart, and it's slowly creaking open, and all these emotions just pouring out. And so I told him, I was abused as a kid, da da da. And he's like, well, this is more than abuse. This is like, he said, I want to even say almost attempted murder at some point, because there's no way you should be walking around living a normal life right now with these bruises on your brain. And I'm like, well, I chalk that up to God because I have a higher purpose and da da da. But when I was telling him these things, he could see the rage boiling out of me. And I was court ordered to therapy. I wasn't able to drive for a long time at all, until we got everything under control again, because the seizures basically had stopped because they were overdosing me with the medication I was taking when I was a kid. I take the same medication now as I did at 12. And I'm many years older, many pounds heavier. So, yeah. But I was like in this like fit of rage. Like there was rage. I could feel the heat of the rage just boiling out of me, and everything just came out. All the crap that I'd been through, all this stuff. And for the first time in my life, I hated with a passion my mother, because according to her, she never did anything to me to cause these seizures. And I'm like, I have permanent bruisings on my brain. I have physical scars from the massive amount of abuse I got. And yet she thinks we were all one big happy family. And I'm like, Okay. So back to the dream. When I got home, it took me a couple months to process and feel all this rage and hate and anger that I had built up for 20, 30 years. Um, yeah, I was 30. I turned 30 that year. So, yeah, I was 30 that year. I'm 44 now. So, that's how long ago this happened. Um, and I was just like, this is crazy. Nuts. And so my oldest was like 7 because my youngest was a few months old at this point, a couple months old at this point. So yeah, I was wrong about him, my oldest. So he was like 7, and my youngest was like 2 months old when this all went down. And after a couple months of, you know, processing all these feelings that I had stored up and bottled up for years, my first initial thought was, um, you can't bear the past, because it will always find a way to come back at you. And if you're not prepared for it, it's going to bite you in the ass. It's going to hurt. It's going to destroy you mentally, physically, um, emotionally. It's going to just rip you a new one. And that's what was happening to me is all these emotions I had stored up for years were just flooding out, and I couldn't, there was no way to stop the floodgates. Like if a dam broke, there's no way to stop the dam from causing the destruction because the flooding is so massive. And that's what was happening, was all this flooding out of emotions and feelings. And after a couple months, I was like, huh. And I remembered the dream. And I honestly can tell you without a doubt, um, this dream was preparing me for what was to come. Uh, Now, I will say that probably a year later, after I had this dream, after I stopped having the dream, my husband and I were looking for a new place to live. We were going to go move out into the country somewhere, out in the boonies. We didn't, because he's like, well, I want to go live here in this small town. I lived there as a child. It's very cute, very small. There's no neighbors. There's nothing there. So we went to, I actually looked up this town online and I saw this house on there, and I'm like, this house is beautiful. We were seeing pictures from previous, and because they posted older pictures, not newer pictures. Um, and I'm like, there's something very odd about this house. And I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, I feel like I know this house. And so we went out to, that weekend, we went out to the town and went to the house. We had called the real estate agent. She's like, well, I can't really show it to you because it just got robbed. Like, the house was so old that it had original copper pipes. Somebody had ripped all the pipes out of the wall. They said it was only 50 grand, and I'm like, that's cool. It's like this old, beautiful Victorian farmhouse. Um, it's from like the 18 or 1700s. Um, and I was super drawn to it. I'm like, I don't know why I'm drawn to this house. Like, I want it. Um, and so we get out there, um, and she's like, yeah, it's 50 grand, but it's probably going to cost you 500,000 to redo everything or just tear it down and replace it. I'm like, I can't tear it down and replace it. It's old. I would rather fix it up. And so we wound up not getting it, but we went and looked at it. And as soon as we pulled around the driveway, because it has a like dirt path driveway, it's that far out in the country. As soon as we pulled around the path, I looked at this house and I'm like, oh my God, I know where this house is from. It's from that dream. And my husband's like, what dream? I'm like, the one I had for 6 months. This is the house. Now, it was in Kansas. I had never been to this town in Kansas before in my life, in this life that I know of. And I kept being super drawn to this house when I was looking at it. But when we got there, energetically, it was the same house, if that makes sense. It may not have looked the same on the outside. It wasn't yellow, but it was the same house. When we get up to the door, It had the same entryway when you first walk in, and then the same living room off to the beyond that. I mean, it was exactly the same setup. And then they had a long hallway going down, but there was no indoor there. It was just like an outer porch that goes on the wraparound porch that was on this house. And I'm like, how is this possible? Because I'd already confirmed for myself that this dream was more about preparing me for what was to come, with the whole thing with the seizures and stuff. Um, but it was an added thing where I'm seeing this physical manifestation of this house I'd had in my dream that my mom and I had never been to together. I had never been to this town before. I grew up in Arkansas, so I didn't go to Kansas at all ever. Like, this was just the weirdest thing. But that was the house that was in my dream that haunted me for 6 months. And as soon as we got there on the property, I realized this was the same house from this dream. And then I started feeling all this negativity coming from the house. And I'm like, no, we are not buying this house. I was drawn to it, I think, for the reason of confirming this was the house from my dream, that it really existed. But once we hit the property, it was like something was screaming, get out, get away from it, go away now. And then we found out later that there had been a murder-suicide in that house. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm not, like, it was this normal, happy family back in the, like, early 1900s. This house had been sitting there pretty much since then. Like, back in the early 1900s, where it was a normal family, and all of a sudden the son went crazy and killed everybody, and then killed himself. And I'm like, yeah, I'm glad we dodged that bullet. But it's just little things like that confirm these dreams are real. They really happen. I mean, I physically saw the house in this dream. I could feel that it was the same house, even though on the outside it didn't look the same. Inside it did. And so, yeah, I can't believe I forgot about that dream, but I wanted to share it with you guys. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything about your interpretation of what that dream meant, let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more, please subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification button so you're alerted to any future videos. And you guys have a great afternoon. Bye.